G'day. No easy way to say this, but I messed up. I really messed up. So the engine that we've got here is one which I recovered and rebuilt probably 4 months ago now. Had a few issues, low oil pressure was one of them, but also had a cracked piston. Piston number 3 had some significant cracks in the top of it. I was lucky enough to be able to machine up a oversized piston and put that in and get the engine running again. So my plan for this is to actually put it into a truck. However, I've been test running this engine, and some people might argue it's a good problem to have, but one thing I've noticed is I can't get the engine to come properly up to temperature. I think I know what the issue is, and it's 100% my fault. And before I actually put the engine into a chassis, I actually want to rectify that and check a couple of other things. This engine's now run for about 10 hours. So I'd like to take a second look at my handiwork on that piston and just make sure that everything is a-okay before I stick it back into a truck. So let me just explain to you quickly what I did or what I didn't do. When I took the head gasket off this engine, when I removed the head, there was actually a section removed at the rear of that gasket, and I'll show you in a sec exactly what I mean. So here I've got a LC3 head which I've been doing work on for another engine, but what you can see here is at the rear of the head there's this cutout, and that actually corresponds exactly with the same cutout on the block. Now Muggins here, after talking to a few people in one of the Morris groups, was actually convinced that that cutout was meant to be there in the head gasket. When you receive one of these head gaskets, and here's a couple of new ones, there's absolutely no cutout for that in the rear. Sorry, I'll put that on the right way. So yeah, basically that isn't accommodated in the replacement head gasket. Now all this, of course, I sort of put 2 and 2 together after the event, once I'd reassembled the engine. And fortunately I was able to check with a couple of other club members. Brad Dunn also helped me out. He was able to have a look at a couple of old head gaskets he had, and just confirmed 100% that there was no cutout in any of these gaskets. So what I've got to assume at this stage is basically when you take that out, maybe it circulates more water around the block and cools faster. I'm not quite sure, but that's what I'm betting might be causing my issue. So yeah, what I'm going to do is basically strip this motor down again. As I say, checking a few things along the way, but yeah, I'll have to replace that head gasket, and we'll call that a $100 plus mistake, but 100% my fault. I shouldn't have cut it out in the first place. So anyway, let's get into it. Now that we've got the head off, we can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. You've got this this part here on the back of the cylinder block, which is obviously part of the water jacket inside the block. And then if we swing back to the head, you can actually see that's the piece that I've cut out, and I think I probably shouldn't have in hindsight. So the two made up perfectly in terms of their positioning. I cannot find anything in any technical information or manuals that I have that indicate that that piece should be cut out. Any diagrams I've seen show the head gasket complete without this section removed. So I've got to assume maybe it was something to do with casting, or possibly even something to do with cleaning or flushing when you have the pieces separated. I'm really not too sure. Maybe one of you can answer that question for me and leave a comment. You might be wondering what the silver looking paint is on there. Well, it's actually silver frost, heavy zinc silver frost. My granddad seemed to think that basically it would help the head gasket seal against the head and the block, and prevent some of that corrosion that might occur where the water passes between the two pieces. Again, you know, what's your experience with that? Let me know. I've sort of have been doing it since my days of working on minis, and I've never had any real reason to stop. It's cheap, and it's something that I just do when I reassemble an engine. Anyway, back to the disassembly. So that's where we're at basically with our disassembly on the engine. I think the biggest thing to remember here, guys and girls, is don't be afraid. I mean, we're talking about old technology. You know, we've got all these videos floating around on YouTube where people just dive in and, unseize motors and get them running, it seems, in an hour. Realistically, with one of these older motors, I think you're better off just taking your time. You've been lucky enough to get a barn find and things aren't too happy in the motor department. It's worth your while to pull a head off and have a bit of a poke around, take the sump off and have a look, clean the sticks and stones oil on the mesh on the oil filter. I can't probably understate how important lubrication is in these old engines. Some of these things might just save you from damaging the motor further. You really have to be spot on with your oil pressure and get as much oil around the motor as quickly as possible. So for something that's been sitting for a whole lot of years and is potentially sludged up, then rather than diving in feet first and potentially doing more damage, you really are better off just to take your time and work your way through the engine and check everything along the way. Originally, the issue with this engine, it was seized initially, and then when I got it unseized and started stripping it down, I noticed that I had a big crack across the top of piston number 3. So I ended up making a new piston up for it and fitting that. It seems to be working a-okay. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on this motor until I actually knew that it was a good runner and wouldn't need a full rebuild. So now that I know it's going to be working well enough to go back into a truck, I'll probably spend a little bit more time on this engine just tidying it up. So there is just a little bit of a lip on a couple of these bores. Number 3 is not too bad. Number 4, probably number 1 and number 4 are probably the worst. So I'll tidy that up. And the other thing I want to do too is just run the hone through each cylinder and just get a little bit of cross hatching back into the bores and just help with that lubrication. 1, 2 and 3 actually aren't too bad. There's still, you probably can't see it on the camera, but there is actually still reasonable cross hatching on number 1. But number 4 for some reason is doesn't come up really well in the camera, but is pretty glazed. So yeah, definitely could use a little bit of help there in the lubrication department. Anyway, so that's where we're at, and we'll crack on. Well, it's been a few days since we've had the chance to get back on this motor, and it's definitely time to crack on. Spring's coming, and we'll get pretty busy outside soon, so we need to get this motor back together and back in the frame of the truck. First job will be to actually remove those lips, and we'll do that before we actually take the pistons out. So I'll take you through that process. But what we're going to be using is a tool here by a company called Lisley. Now, these are specially designed for actually removing the lips on cylinder bores. We do need to be really careful using this tool. It is quite easy to actually damage the cylinder wall. So when we make these adjustments, these sit in the top of your cylinder bore, and then when we adjust this top bolt down, it actually pushes the 3 sides out. So they expand in the bore, and then you've got a cutting edge on one of those sides, which actually sits on the lip. And we need to do this incrementally. So we just adjust that very slightly. So we've got a little bit of pressure there. And then we drop a socket on the larger diameter nut here, and we rotate that in the bore, and you'll actually hear it scraping and cutting that material off the lip. It might take us 3 or 4 goes to actually remove that lip. And of course, as I say, being very, very careful not to actually cut into the main part of the cylinder bore. We don't want to do that. We are going to hone that later, but yeah, for now, we just want to remove the lip. I know there'd probably be machine shops everywhere cringing in fear at the sight of these. Hey, we're doing this on a budget, right? So we're looking for ways that we can machine and do stuff on this motor without spending a lot of money. These are fairly cheap and cheery. This, I think, is the actual budget model of this. There are better and more expensive versions. I picked this up at a flea market for, I think it was $25 or $30 secondhand. To me, it looks like it's basically, maybe it got used once and then put back in its box. You can buy these online anywhere from about 90 to 120 Australian dollars. But it's one of those tools, you're not going to use it every day, but it is pretty handy to have it in your toolbox if you're going to be playing around with these old motors. Now, there are going to be a couple of other items that you'll need to do this job. The first being good old WD-40, simply just to lubricate the cylinder wall and the cutting tool as you're working your way up and out of the cylinder. You don't have to use WD-40. Any light machine oil will probably work for you. I prefer WD-40. I don't think there's anything that you can't use this for. I have used 10W30 before, but I just found that a little bit sticky and hard to clean up. Keeping in mind that we are going to potentially be dropping metal shavings down into our cylinder and on top of our piston. So we do need to take care. And to grab a lot of that, I'll be using 2 pieces of cut down microfiber material. You can buy a bag of microfiber cloths from your local hardware. I picked up a big bag of these for I think $10 on the way out. But these microfiber cloths, they will pull the stink off a monkey. And certainly metal shavings, they're like a magnet. They just seem to attract the metal shavings and they stay in the cloth. We're not going to bother reusing them. They'll be a throwaway, but we're just trying to catch as much material as we can and stop it from going down between the piston and the cylinder wall. Once we've done this and we've pulled out our microfiber cloths, I'm also just going to give it all a quick vacuum out before we actually lift our pistons out in an effort to get every last bit of material out of there. So what we're going to do is take our cutting tool and we're actually going to sit that in the top of the cylinder there. We'll grab our small socket and adjust the bolt right on the top of the tool. and just get that so it sits nicely on the top there. Generally I give it about another probably 1/5 of a turn. Again, we'll just give it a little bit more WD-40, never have too much of a good thing. And we're going to rotate that tool in a clockwise direction. You can hear straight away that that is doing what it's meant to do. You can hear it cutting there. Remembering that we're not cutting the actual cylinder wall, we're just cutting the lip at the top of the cylinder wall. Feel that straight away. Yep, that's definitely starting to work there. I can see a little bit of material in the bottom where the microfiber towel is sitting, so that means that we're catching that that material. We'll tension that up just a fraction more. A little bit more WD-40 on our cutting edge. And again, going in a clockwise direction. Try and keep it as even as you can. We need to check this continuously because we don't want to cut into the cylinder wall. We only want to be cutting that lip. That's really starting to work there. I've got a very fine amount of lip there now. Again, we'll just make another tiny adjustment there in terms of how much the blade forces against the cylinder wall. Give him a few turns. That's wonderful. I'll once this is finished, I'll actually get in there with the camera and try and show you a little bit more detail on the cylinder wall. Again, you know, I can't stress enough that we're not actually cutting into the cylinder wall here. We're just trying to take that lip off. So you do need to constantly check this. We don't want to go too deep. That would be the last thing we want to do. And it's a gradual process. We don't want to get too heavy-handed. I reckon that we are very close there now, very close. So again, we'll give it a little bit more lubrication. And I'm going to go a very small amount here. There's probably machine shops out there that are cringing right now. As I say, for what we're trying to do here, I think this is more than enough. And I can't actually feel that lip there anymore with my finger. So we'll back this center bolt out now and remove our tool. So we'll just clean as much as we can off the cylinder wall, as carefully as we can. I'm going to try and extract the first terry towel and cloth as quickly as best we can. And then the second cloth. And they'll go straight in the bin. Just for good measure, I am going to put the vacuum in there.
It worked out easier to show you this in a still image. You can quite clearly see the material that's been removed around the top of the cylinder wall there. You've got a nice shiny surface, and we still need to hone this cylinder, of course, but what we'll do now is we'll crack on and do the other cylinders.
You can actually see the material there that is building up on that blade, which we probably clean off before we put back in, and that is just the material that is taken off on that lip. We don't want to put that back into our next cylinder if we can, so a quick squirt of WD-40 just cleans that blade up, and it's back to work. So we'll just have a quick look inside each one of these cylinder walls now. So that was cylinder number 1, cylinder number 2, number 3, and number 4. And we know now with absolute certainty that as we slide those pistons out, we are not going to break any rings or do any damage. So what we're going to be doing is just rotating the motor around. Each one of these retaining nuts on the bearing caps have a split pin. So we'll be taking those split pins out, taking the nuts off and gently removing those bearing caps, and we'll do that on all 4 cylinders. Okay, so we've got all these pistons out now, and we can do a proper inspection of the bores. Again, I'm not seeing anything. It's probably too dark to actually see with the camera, but look, considering the age of the motor and the fact that it ran with low oil pressure for quite a number of years, I believe, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing. Realistically, this is a budget recovery. You know, we are not rebuilding the entire engine. We're just using the opportunity while the motor is out, and we know that we found the major problems with it, to give it a basic overhaul and make sure that when it goes in, it should run reliably, and yeah, let us have some fun. So the first thing I want to do here is actually rotate my crankshaft, and I'm going to turn it so that the bearing journal of the crankshaft is out of the way. if you like, or the bulk of it is out of the way of the bore. We certainly don't want to run the risk of hitting that, but what we are going to do is put some cloth and material at the bottom of the cylinder and covering that part of the crankshaft. I really am trying wherever I can here not to let anything drop through into the bottom of the motor, even though we don't have a bottom on the motor, so to speak. We want to keep any loose material off our crankshaft if we possibly can, and we'll just repeat that process now across all these cylinders. Our next part of the process is going to be to hone these cylinder walls. Now you could probably easily spend a day just talking about cylinder hones and different methods for doing it. There is a lot of YouTube videos out there already on the subject, so if you want more detail on that, then that would be my recommendation. Find one of the more professional YouTube channels, if you like, and they'll teach you a lot more about honing and the correct methods for doing it. The hone that I use is a pretty standard one. It's an adjustable 50 to 135 mil hone. And I always tend to use the medium grit stones. I seem to achieve the best results with those. Again, you know, cleanliness is the name of the game here. We're going to clean down those cylinder walls again with brake cleaner and try and get as much potential contaminants and residual oil off those cylinder walls before we actually do the honing. And I'll then use good old WD-40 to lubricate the cylinder wall. Now, keeping in mind, these cylinder walls aren't badly glazed up. You know, we've got to consider this is our budget build. So, you know, we're not going to be going to the same level that you would possibly in a machine shop or a full engine rebuild. We're just making sure that we can get a little bit more oil on the walls of these cylinders. Now, guys and girls, it's really important to remember when you are using one of these cylinder hones that when you are rotating this hone with the drill, you don't actually pull it too far out of the top or push it too far through the bottom, because what will happen, you really wouldn't want to come more than probably, I would say, 15 mil out of the top while you're honing, or the same applies in the bottom. And the reason for that, it's pretty easy to actually come out too far, and what you might see happening there is your honing tools actually then just basically pop out, and under speed they'll flick themselves and you risk breaking the stone. But what you also do is you basically bevel this edge at the top of the cylinder wall, and we certainly don't want to be doing that. So as you're moving up and down there, yeah, probably I would say 15 to 20 mil tops out of the top while you're using that hone, and the same in the bottom. And we're really not in there for a very long time at all. It's just a couple of up and down actions in the cylinder wall, and then we're going to stop the drill and remove the tool. And as I say, we're not doing anything but just taking a little bit of the glaze that is there off those cylinder walls and allowing those walls to retain more oil from the bottom of the motor. So we'll pop some WD-40 all around the edge of that cylinder wall to make sure he's well lubricated before we put our hone in. Sit our hone in the top there, just slide him down into position, wind that down, plenty of lubricant, make sure those stones are well lubricated. Now I've got our drill on a low speed here. I'm going to bring it up to the top and make sure those stones are sitting as flush as they can against the wall of the cylinder, and here we go. And that's probably about all I'm going to do on that cylinder wall.
To be honest, it's not the best honing job I've ever done, but in fairness, probably also not the worst. What you can see there is the way that we've started to blend away where we made that cut into the lip at the top of the cylinder, which has turned out pretty good. There is actually some scoring there, which is highlighted now that we've actually put the hone through that cylinder. For what we're trying to achieve here, I don't really think that's going to worry us. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with this result.
Really just want to make sure we get absolutely every single piece of potentially contaminated material out of there. I've just put some clean microfiber cloths on the dipstick actually, which I'm going to see if I can use that to plunge each cylinder again with the brake cleaner and just get the last of the muck that might be in there. Just give them a wet down our cylinder again. Each time I do this, I'm adding another clean microfiber towel. So it's steadily getting thicker and thicker to the point where it probably won't go down the cylinder, but we'll keep going here. Now the end result here was never going to be perfect, and I have noticed that we've got a couple of little score marks on cylinder number 4 there. I'm not too concerned about that because they're not deep, but they are definitely a mark on the wall of the cylinder. But we've got some good cross hatching on these cylinders now, and I think that will be more than enough to achieve the result that we're looking for and get some better lubrication on the walls of these cylinders. And yeah, we'll look at cleaning up these pistons now and putting everything back together. Guys and girls, you're probably going to get sick of me banging on about the importance of good oil pressure and using good quality oils in these motors, but here's a good example why. You can probably pick out that little bit of a score mark there. Now that will be simply some piece of contaminant that's been picked up in that bearing in the oil and has basically got into that bearing and scored that. Now fortunately, I try as I may, I cannot actually feel that with my finger, so whatever it was that went around there, it was enough to score the white metal, but it wasn't, it wasn't to the point, or it's actually worn down again to a point where it's quite smooth, and you can see the same mark on the other journal. So yeah, whatever it was, it just sat in there and spun around in the bearing. Not really great for these bearings. They're a white metal bearing, so they're a poured bearing, and then they have to be machined. Unfortunately, not an engine where you can just go out and buy a set of bearings off the shelf and pop them into your con rods and away you go. Well, the ultrasonic bath's just cut out. I've had that piston in there for roughly 20 minutes doing both sides and then rolling it over onto the top. And I know I shouldn't be amazed, but I tell you what, it's just incredible. It has completely demolished the carbon that was built up around those rings. I'm kind of guessing that saved me a heap of work because I was going to take those rings out and get in there and clean all that carbon out, but wow. I shouldn't really be amazed, but I am. You know, it's just incredible what these ultrasonic cleaners will get off. And yeah, I'm going to soak that now just in a solution of petrol with a bit of an oil mix in it, just simply so that straight away I can get that cleaner out of there and get an oil-based solution in. So I've got a little container here prepared, and I'm just going to switch that around in there, make sure I get that into the gudgeon pin and everywhere it needs to go, basically, to flush any of that cleaning solution out. So this is my number 4 piston, and this ring is really, the top ring is completely clagged with carbon. That ring won't even move in that groove. The second ring's okay. I'm going to pop it in the bath and yeah, see if we can achieve the same result and bust that carbon out of there. Let's give it a go.
Now I have to apologise here, guys. I tried to get some real close-up shots of the ultrasonic part working with my camera, and it did horrible things to the camera. So obviously a lot of stray RF that comes off those ultrasonic cleaners, and unfortunately I lost that and other footage while I tried to capture this. So a still photo will have to suffice, and we did achieve exactly the same result as we did with the other piston, where the carbon that was on there was just completely shattered and busted off, and that ring at the top spun like a top when it came out after around about 15 minutes in total, and that was with a couple of different rotations and they're turning it on its end. So yeah, a very good result.
We're just going to get this engine back together now. We've finished our cleaning, and yeah, everything looks okay. So we'll do our reassembly. It's just the reverse of the disassembly. And yeah, hopefully at the end of it, we'll have a running engine. Let's go. possibly one of the handiest little books you can own if you've got an LC3 or a PV Morris Commercial. The driver's handbook, absolutely invaluable, and a lot of information in here which for some reason doesn't appear in the service manual. So in this particular case I'm using it to get my torque down procedure right on the head. But pretty much anything on the day-to-day maintenance side is contained in this book. Well worth your trouble to get your hands on it, and you'll actually get a free PDF download courtesy of Brad Dunn on the Morris Commercial Owners and Enthusiasts Facebook page. Well, the motor's back together, and that's a bit of a relief, really. So I'm just about to crank it over. I've just hooked my little fuel tank up into the fuel pump. Found out that my radiator actually has a leak at the tap. It is a bit of a bodgy repair down there, so that'll be something. It is my test radiator, so that's okay, but I'll need to address that. I'm leaking water at an alarming rate underneath there. But yeah, look, I'm pretty excited. We'll fire her up now, and yeah, might take a couple of goes, and I can guarantee it's going to be smoky. We've got oil sort of everywhere inside that. Rightio, first start. Let's see how we go. how good is that? I guess the final piece of the puzzle will be actually making sure that we are coming up to temperature. But it's actually a bit of a relief knowing that she'll fire up and run, and that's a whole big step closer now to getting it into Olive Oyl and getting the truck back on the road. So to say I'm excited would be an understatement, and I think it's been a pretty good day. Brad Dunn Vintage Truck Supplies. Guaranteed to fix leaking radiators. Well, that's it for this week, guys and girls. So I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please click the thumbs up, and we love it if you'd leave us comments as well too. We love your feedback. And by all means, feel free to subscribe. Just want to give a quick shout out to my little niece Anita, who turned 5 this week. Can't believe 5 years old, big 5. All right, guys, happy restorations, safe travels, and we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.